What's up, y'all? How you doing? All right, so how many of you people served in the VBS? Yeah? All right, how many of you struggled to wake up this morning? Maybe because of VBS, but like for real, like my alarm goes off and I'm just like, I hate everybody right now. I don't want to do anything. So, I know it's not very pastoral, it's not, but I'm just being real, okay? I'm just being real, okay? So, we've been in the questions series, okay? We got a lot to jump into today. Can you pull the questions slides up for me? Thanks. So, first week we talked about, is there a God? Because it's kind of like the foundation of it all, right? Like, is there a God? Does he exist? Do we care? Stuff like that. Because really, nothing else matters. If there's no God, then you kind of get to make up your own rules, right? Like you can say, I feel like this. I feel like the sky's not really blue, that it's some other color. Or there's actually this other theory that came out early 2000s that we're not actually really alive, that we're all somewhere in some vat, and that we're experiencing something that's within a computer program, and we're all hooked up to machines, and we're like sitting like test tube babies. This is a real thing. And so reality is not really reality. This is a real theory. And so in order to explore that theory, they created a movie series called The Matrix based on this theory. Like, this is a real thing. Some guy actually wrote a doctoral paper on it, and then some movie producer's like, let's try it. And the whole time I'm just like, this is reality. Like let's not overcomplicate things, because there is a God, and he loves us and he cares for us. All right, so there is a God. Now, the other thing we did was, all right, let's take my watch, let's take all the pieces and parts of the watch, and let's stick it in a box. We're going to shake up the box for 4.3 billion years, because that's how old the Earth is. The universe is apparently 16.9 trillion years old. But hey, we'll just go with the 4.3, that low ball number there. 4.3 billion years old for the Earth. Shaking up that watch parts in the box, and out comes a watch fully assembled with the battery fully charged, and it's on time. No, of course not. What's going to come out? Dust. It's been completely destroyed down to nothing. Why? Because matter tends towards chaos. It does not tend towards organization. Any sort of organization or structure is there because an organizer put it there, right? A designer put it there. And so when you look out into creation and everything that's there, that lets you know that there is a God. But that doesn't let you know much further than that, right? It's just a God. So how do you get beyond the a God? How do you know which God is right? We didn't really jump into that one too much. Obviously, you're at church, so we're kind of hanging with the Christian God is the right one. But that will be, I kind of have gotten some of those responses. How do we know that our God is the right God? How do we know that everybody else is wrong, sort of thing? And so we're actually going to get into that 1 week coming down the road. So we're going to talk about that. Last week we talked about creation versus evolution and the creation story. If you missed that one, which by the way, I'd say 80% of you missed it. So if you weren't here, which is practically all of you, you can go on our YouTube channel and go watch that. I posted that this week. And so you can just see some of the arguments against evolution and how it's kind of ridiculous. My favorite is the fact that they use natural selection, survival of the fittest. You heard this one, right? Natural selection and mutations, right? And my favorite example of that is the two giraffes. Y'all remember from last week? No, of course you don't. So, all right, so there's a long-necked giraffe and the short-necked giraffe. The long-necked giraffe eats the leaves from the trees. The short necks are apparently stupid because they only think that there's trees to eat from. Bushes and grass don't count. So they die off because the long necks have a better chance at life, right? No, they die off because the long necks are heartless creatures that do not share, okay? So that's why the short neck giraffes die, okay? And so we started with how many? Two giraffes. And then we ended up with how many? One. That's the process of natural selection. But isn't that kind of backwards from evolution? Evolution says you're supposed to start with, and then, that was actually backwards. So here's what they say. They say mutations. Mutations produce a new species. However, we have no record of any mutation that ever produced a new species. We don't even have a record of a mutation that ever was beneficial for the species. So we have records of mutations. Things like that happens all the time. Like they do these experiments on these poor fruit flies every day where they subject them to crazy amounts of radiation okay, and just radiation over and over and over again to try and make something other than fruit flies. Instead, all they get is a bunch of radiated fruit flies, okay? And so, in the end, it's still a fruit fly with lots of problems, okay, because they had mutations. But that's it. No beneficial mutation. So the mechanism is completely broke. Also, the fossils just don't support it, okay? So that's really what we talked about more was the fossil record, and there's nothing else out there other than humans. There's no missing link or anything like that, okay? So that was last week. This week, we're going to go into a slightly more mature topic. Because essentially last week was talking about Genesis 1, okay, creation. We're going to take a step into the next chapter, Genesis 2, okay, and we're going to talk about, here it comes, that slide, the doctrine of human sexuality.
Oh, yeah.
I know, everyone's so excited, right? Okay, so here's, first off, here's what we need to do. This is a mature topic, okay? For middle schoolers, this is a very mature topic, okay? We're not getting into dating and all those things or anything like that, because again, you can't even drive her to the movies yet, so really dating is kind of silly. So this is going to get more into identity issues and stuff like that. We're going to talk about deviations from God's design, but here's what I need, okay? This is important. Every time I say one of the words, like sexuality, I need you to not giggle. Yeah, okay? Just like that. I need you not to be like, that's sexuality, right? Okay, so please don't do that, all right? Otherwise, this is going to make a very long discussion, okay? So, we're going to talk about what it means, biblical manhood, biblical womanhood, God's design, all of that. But we're going to be anchored in Genesis 2. So if you brought your Bibles, we're going to just start right there, Genesis 2. If you don't know where that's at, it's on the left. All the way at the left, okay? And you're going to see Genesis 1. The very next chapter is Genesis 2. Okay, so that's how it works. I know. Mind blown. Okay, so Moses is the guy who wrote this book, okay? So it's been a little while, but he has written all about God's creation. Now, think about this. Hey, where's my side conversation coming from? Okay, so chapter 1 is all about the 6 days of creation, okay? God said, and there was, okay? And it goes through all 6 days, and humanity was the last thing that God created on the 6th day. So here we are. We have a full explanation of how the creation went in chapter 1. Chapter 2 then goes into deeper detail about day 6, okay? So it's not like God created and then God created again, okay? It's God created, then he rested on the 7th day. But on the 6th day, we're going to get a little bit more detail about how the creation of humanity went, okay? And it's to let us know more about ourselves, what's true, what's right, what was his intention, okay, and how we should live that intention out, okay? So we're going to be in chapter 2. We're going to start in verse 18, okay? So here we go. I'll read out of mine. You can read out of yours. Then the Lord said, "It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him." Now out of the ground the Lord God had formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. Hey guys, that's really distracting. Thanks. So, and whatever the man called every living creature, that was its name. The man gave names to all the livestock and the birds of the heavens and every beast of the field. But for Adam, there was not found a helper fit for him. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and while he slept, took one of his ribs and closed up its place with flesh. And the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man, he made into a woman and brought her to the man. Then the man said, "This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And the man and his wife are both naked and unashamed." All right, so now let's go through a couple lessons. I'm going to give you a few little topics, outline sort of thing, that comes straight out of the scripture, okay, of what God's design was and is. But then we're going to go into the deviations from that design. Okay, that'll be our last point. All right, so number 1, the man was alone. Now, who's the one who noticed the man was alone? Anybody? Yeah. God did. Adam had no idea he was alone. Adam was not lonely. He was not like out there in the garden being like, "Man, I wish I had a friend." Like that was not Adam, okay? Instead, it was God who noticed that it was not good for the man to be alone. See, a lot of times we think when it comes to guys and girls that it's like two halves of a whole, and Adam was just half a whole, and God needed to make the other half so that he could be whole. We say silly things like, you complete me, right? To the girl, you meet, your soulmate of your dreams, all right? And you're like, you're my better half, right? And so we say all these things, but none of that's true. That's not biblically accurate at all. Adam was a completely whole person, and he was not lonely because he was within the presence of God. He did not lack anything. Because one, he had not sinned yet, which is really where the brokenness starts. But it's because he was in the presence of God. He was fully satisfied as a complete, perfect man in the presence of God. He didn't even know that he was lonely. It was God who said, we need to find somebody for Adam. Okay? Because the Lord, it's not so much that he wanted to be alone, it's that he needed a helper fit for him. So there's this next thing that God does. He takes Adam, he says, okay, you're going to start naming all the animals. And just think about some of the animals I'm going to answer questions later. So just think about all the animals that he would have to name, right? Lion comes up, big cat. Tiger comes up, another big cat. All right, then like a bird comes by, a couple different frogs, and he's like, green frog, red frog, blue frog, kind of whatever. Then a platypus comes up, and he's like, well, you're weird, right? And so he's like, let's just come up with some weird names here. And so he has to come up with all these names. And every time a guy platypus comes by, here comes the girl platypus. And so like everyone, I've heard these pastors say that what God is doing is saying, see, Adam, you need a girl too. Like trying to make Adam lonely. But here's the thing. If Adam is lonely, that would have been solved the minute the puppy walked by, right? Okay, like when he sees, puppy, right? Like he is no longer lonely, right? Because he's got a puppy, man's best friend. No, what God is actually doing here is he's showing Adam that there is nothing else, no other creature that is equal to him. Okay? So I'm going to crush some hopes. I'm going to crush some dreams. I'm going to get emails from parents on this statement. But have you ever heard the phrase, all dogs go to heaven? I know. Sorry, but biblically, they're not on our level. Okay? So, they do not have the ability to reason, to comprehend, to have logic, okay? They are not made in the image of God as we are. So what Adam is actually noticing is how all the animals, every animal, every other creature, as they come by, he says, none of these bear the image like I do. None of them are equal to me. Now here's the other thing. There's only other one person that Adam could be talking to and having a relationship with at this point. Who is it? It's God, okay? Because all right, there's the animals. Eve's not here yet. It's just God. So it's God, Adam, animals. Okay, so Adam at this point is like, okay, they're not equal to me. But then he goes to have conversations with God. Do you think he felt equal to God? Absolutely not. Like God just probably all of a sudden started talking about the cosmos and how he just made everything with the word of his mouth and how all of time can be spanned in his hand. And literally you've got Adam okay, like literally just Adam's just thinking, I have no idea what you're talking about right now. I've been alive for 3 days, and I was made like this. I wasn't even born or grew up. I'm just boom, adult, right? And so Adam has no concept of what's even going on. So when he's talking with God, he's like, okay, definitely not equal to God. But then when he looks at the animals, okay, definitely not equal to me. And so what God is trying to show Adam is that there is no one who is his equal. So God is the one who says, it is not good that the man should be alone. Now, here's the thing. Biologically, the man was already a man. God did not have to go back and add on to the man to make him a man, okay? That was already there. So that kind of cues you into some foreshadowing, okay? That the plan was probably always to have a man and a woman. And matter of fact, in Genesis 1:27, God actually has this conversation. He says, let us make man in our image. And it says, man and woman, male and female, he made them in his image, both of them. So it wasn't like that far apart. It was for a purpose that we might understand each other, both male and female. Okay, so here we go. Number 2, the woman was, this is a good word, suitable. Okay, the woman was suitable. In other words, she is Adam's counterpart. Her name is Eve. Okay, so it does not mean that she's, again, the half to the whole. It doesn't mean that she's completing him or anything like that, okay? No, it's finally, this is actually what he says, at last, there's someone like me who I can have conversations with. Because the animals don't get it, and I don't get God. And so finally, there's someone who's on my level. And so God says that they're suitable. And the word suitable in Hebrew originally means fit together. It's a perfect match counterpart, equal, okay? Not two halves of a whole, but a perfect match counterpart. So what this means is Eve is not inferior to Adam, okay? Adam is not like Master Adam who lords over Eve or anything, none of that, okay? Eve is not Adam's secretary who writes down the name of the animal as he names him. Like that's not what it works, okay? And Adam does not have authority to rule over her. And again, neither does it mean that they're incomplete without each other as individuals. Because again, here they are, both before the fall, no sin, in the presence of God. They're not broken at all. Now, once they broke, when they fell into sin, that's when they became incomplete. That's when they lacked something. They lacked holiness. They lacked righteousness. They lacked a guilt-free or shameless life, which is why immediately they hid themselves, right? The very last verse that we read is they were both naked and unashamed. One of the very first things that they noticed when they sin is that they were naked. Who cares? They're the only two people on the planet, and they're married. Like, they can't be like, cover up, people might see you. There's no other people to see. I love it because God says to Adam, Adam, why are you hiding? And he says, because I was naked. And it's amazing because, God says back to him, who told you you were naked? You've been naked the whole time, bro. Clothes haven't been invented yet, sort of thing. And they've got fig leaves that they're kind of stitching together. No, what he's really saying is, I'm exposed. My sin, my shame, my rebellion against God is now on display for everyone to see. That's what that phrase means. I'm ashamed now. So this is before the fall. They're not broken. However, we are broken because we're part of that fall. This is why Jesus came, okay? This is actually the whole purpose in why Jesus came, is because he lived as a human, just like us in every way. It says that he was tempted in every way, just like us, but it says he never sinned. He was never broken. He was always complete. Why did we need that? Because we needed someone to show us how it was supposed to be. And if you place your faith in Jesus, then you begin to experience what it means to live as a whole and complete person. So no matter what you feel about genderisms or identity issues, or you got to find your boo or something like that person is never going to complete you. Experiencing gender dysphoria and re-identifying yourself is never going to make you feel complete. The only thing that will ever make you feel complete is the Creator who can redeem you from your sin. So now let's look at what he says. Okay, I love this part. He looks at Eve, right, wakes up and says, this is at last, finally, I've got someone I can talk to. I've got someone who I can relate to. At last, this is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. Now, first off, this is how I know that Adam is smarter than me, okay? Because Adam says, you're going to be called woman because you are out of man. That's literally what man means. It's out of man, okay? In the Hebrew, it's ish, which is the original language. Ish for man, and wo ish, meaning out of ish, out of man. And so it's not so much of a subjugation, it's just literally saying this is the process that God did. Okay? So he's super smart. I said something stupid like, you're the prettiest girl I've ever seen. Right? But yeah, like, right? But that's who Adam is. And he says these things, and they're recorded so that we can know something about it. First off, a rib is what God used. Have you ever wondered why God used a rib? I mean, there's like some other parts, right? You could use like hair. Adam was actually formed out of the dust, and then God breathed the breath of life into him, which I always get, like, have y'all seen the new little short from Frozen where Olaf becomes alive? Have y'all seen that little short on Disney Plus yet? Yeah, there's that moment, and he's like, I'm alive, right? Like, that's exactly the moment that I think happened with Adam, that he's like dust. God breathes into him, and he's just like, I'm alive, right? And just like, this moment, right? So he could have done that with Eve. Instead, he goes for the rib. Now, I think there's a couple reasons. Because if God had taken an arm instead of a rib, that would have been complicated. Because then Adam would have been maimed and deformed for the rest of his life. But also, I think the location matters. The ribs is what protects all of your vital organs, and it supports you. Without your ribs, literally, you would die. Because you have no protection, no support for the structure of your body inside. In a way, I think this might be God saying, as humanity, not individuals, but as a race, it takes both genders. Because what's the very first thing he tells them to do? Anybody know? It's in chapter 1. Yeah. You were in the last chapter. Okay, you were in the last hour. But yes, be fruitful and multiply. That's kind of a weird first thing to hear from God, right? It's not like, hey, okay, so Adam, this is Eve. Eve, this is Adam. Hey, this is, like, literally, it's like, hey, y'all get busy. Go make babies. That was the first thing he says to them. And it's subdue the earth. And so, they did, by the way, and that's kind of how we got here. So, it's the purpose of saying, as humanity, this is how it works, okay? And they were naked and had no shame. All right, so now, number 4, let's go into the deviations from the design, and we'll be done. The first deviation that I want to go, I'm going to go through 3, but the very first one is the one that shows up in the Big 10. Now, the one that we want to talk about the most is homosexuality, maybe transgenderism, or something like that. But did either of those make it into the Big 10? Like, do you hear in the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not be homosexual? No. What does it say? It says other things, like really important things, like don't murder people. That's a good one, right? Don't lie. That's also a good one, right? Don't steal. Also good.
Honor thy father and mother.
Honor your parents. I love that one. And then don't commit adultery. Adultery makes it into the Big 10. Now, you could maybe make the argument that that's because more people might deal with that one than the homosexuality issue. But I think it's because if homosexuality is against the design of God and transgenderism is against the design of God, adultery is against the covenant of God. When God made Adam and Eve, he made them husband and wife. And the covenant says to have and to hold, right, riches and poor, sickness and health, till death do you part. That's the covenant. Now, a covenant is different than a contract. A contract is, hey, you're going to hold up your end of the bargain, and I'm going to hold up my end of the bargain. But if you don't hold up your end of the bargain, then we're done. Contract is over. That's not a covenant. A covenant is saying, hey, I'm going to covenant with you to live like this between you and me. End of statement. Like there's not this quid pro quo kind of, hey, if you do this, I'll do this. It's not that. It's, hey, I'm going to live in love, in compassion, and faithfulness to you until death do us part. Now, they make the same covenant, but it's 2 covenants actually before God. Why does it happen that way? Because when God gave us the gift of marriage, the gift of being in covenant with each other, it's actually to reflect Him being in covenant with us. All throughout the New Testament, it refers to the church as the bride of Christ, and it refers to Jesus as the groom. Ephesians 5:27 tells us this dynamic between the 2 of us. See, think of it this way. How faithful are we to Jesus? Pretty bad, right? Like how many times have you rebelled and disobeyed and been unfaithful to Jesus today? Within the last 2 days, right? Probably quite a lot. But Jesus' faithfulness remains. In the same way, this is how a covenant is supposed to be between a husband and a wife. There is one exception that in the case of adultery, that if one has cheated on the other one kind of concept, then it's, here's the word, permissible, is what Jesus says. Like, it's permissible to get a divorce. But he very clearly says, but it's not desirable. Matter of fact, Jesus' concept is that you would be like him in the church, and that you would just come back, repent, and renew the covenant. I'm only saying this to you because I don't know if anyone's ever going to say this to you again, okay? So, marriage is also a temporary covenant. Did you know that? It's till death do us part, right? So it's temporary. It's got a time limit on it, okay? And when one of you dies, that's the end of the covenant. Like, you're not going to go to heaven and still be married. Oh, yeah, just blew your minds a little bit there, didn't I? So, during this life, it is supposed to be marked by love, compassion, and faithfulness. And it's directly against the covenant design of God, okay? Hebrews 13:4, God says he will judge the adulterers and the sexually immoral. Now, here's where I want to let you know what really adultery is. We tend to think of it in a very narrow view, that it's like a husband and a wife and one of them cheats on somebody else, right? That's such a narrow view of what adultery actually is. Here in Hebrews 13:4, it actually uses the word pornos. Does that sound familiar? Yes. If you say no, that's fine. I'm totally fine with that for you at this age. But it means anything outside of marriage. So premarital, extramarital, pornography, anything like that is what is in the context of this word. So the covenant is designed between a husband and a wife till death do us part. That's the covenant. That's it. That's the only model that we're given. So that's deviation number one. And I want to start there because honestly, I think it might be, I don't know if it's a stronger affront to the Lord, but it made the Big Ten. So it might be a stronger affront to the Lord. All right, so number two, let's talk about homosexuality. So the first one is a deviation from God's covenant. Second one is a deviation from God's design. Okay? So the reason sin is so appealing or so attractive, any sin, is because it's a distortion of the truth. It's got just enough truth in it to make you believe it. So, for example, have you ever heard this phrase, who are you to tell me who I can love? Okay, so I could argue that point, but really I think what the deeper statement is, I don't know that you fully understand what love is compared to my understanding of love. We think it's all based upon emotional, right? Who I can love. Maybe even spiritual or intellectual. We might add those in there. But what they're doing is they're completely jettisoning God's physical, literal, biological design. And you can't do that. It's either all or nothing. So, I'm very blessed because I've been married now for 11 years, almost 12 years, to a very pretty lady who's still in the room, and that's why I'm saying all these things, so that she hears it. And so, the best part is that it's not so much about companionship or love, even though those are good things. But remember, if that was not originally God's design with Adam and Eve, it was to find an equal mate who is suitable for that person. That's the best part. Like, that's why I love getting to do ministry alongside of her, is because we're equal doing this together. And having love, having companionship, having intimacy with somebody that no one else knows me like she knows me. Okay? Not even my parents know me like she knows me. Okay? That is a truth. That is a good gift from God. The distortion is that you think it can be for just anybody. Because, who are we to say that love is for only these people or those people, and it's excluded from these people? God is, because he actually put the design there. It's the most exclusive relationship created between a husband and wife. There's no one else allowed into that. Not even the kids are allowed in there. Like, they're kind of there, and they're hover all the time. Like, they're there, okay? But it's not true, okay? So, both Old Testament and New Testament actually specifically state that homosexuality is wrong. And here's what's interesting. They don't use a word for it. They didn't like give it a name or a specific word. They actually spelled it out. So this is where it's weird. Okay, so like Leviticus 18:22 literally says, "You shall not lie with a male as with a woman is an abomination." Not like, hey, don't be a homosexual. Like, hey, let me explain really what I'm talking about here. Like with some detail. Leviticus 20:10-21, it goes through a list of very explicit, sinful sexual scenarios. All of them are an abomination to the Lord. Now, I'm not going to go through the list because they're weird, okay? But in that list is the same exact statement of a man lying with a man. That's the exact Hebrew language in there. It's not a word, it's a phrase. And so the purpose is that you can understand without any misconception what this might be. But, all right, let's say you're like, okay, that's Old Testament, bro. That's not like current. Okay, let's go to New Testament. All right, so Paul stated very clearly in two locations, 1 Corinthians 6:9 and 1 Timothy 6:9. Both times he uses the phrase malakoi ut arsenokotai, which is Greek. Ooh, I'm so fancy. All right, and it literally means men who practice homosexuality. This one gets into the phrase a little bit more. What it's actually saying very clearly is this is not appropriate. And both times, homosexuality is found in a list of other sexual sins, like adultery. Adultery actually comes first on the list. I don't know if you've ever noticed this. This is something I've discovered in the last week. Adultery is always higher in the list than the homosexuality. Again, I don't know for sure that adultery is like a worse thing to God or not, but I'm just finding a lot of evidence that it might be. So, let's talk about the last and final deviation, transsexuality. Now, this is a new dilemma. Does anybody know why this is a new dilemma? Why? Think about it. Like, has anyone ever dealt with this in history before? No. Why? It wasn't possible. Technology. This is like the last 20 years kind of issue. It was not physically possible to perform the surgeries and the hormone therapies in order to make it possible. So, like, Scripture doesn't say anything about transgenderism or transsexuality or any of those things. Why? Because it was not even a possibility 2,000 years ago, okay? So, let's talk about it just a little bit. Again, it focuses on a deviation from the design of God when someone is experiencing what's called gender dysphoria, meaning the gender that you were assigned at birth. That's their language, not mine. I love it. But the gender you were assigned at birth, you have a dysphoria or a disconnect from it now. So, guy was born a guy, doesn't want to be a guy, so he wants to become a girl. Okay? Now, surgically, that is quasi-possible. Quasi. Then they use hormones to make it appear even more possible. But either way, genetically, he will always be a man. Here's what I mean by that. I'm answering questions later. In order for a baby to be formed, it requires an X chromosome, not just any X chromosome, but an X chromosome from a woman, and it requires either an X chromosome or a Y chromosome from the male. You can't have two female X chromosomes, okay, and you can't have two Y chromosomes. It requires one female X chromosome and then either a male X, which leads to a baby daughter, or a Y male, which leads to a son. You have to have that. You can change the physical all you want. You can even change the hormonal. They can actually begin to act, which generally they start doing that before they start doing the gender things, like surgery and hormonal treatments and stuff like that, which kind of lets you know it's really more up here than it is down there. So what happens is you're still a male biologically until the day you die. So this is what I mean, like, they present it like it's possible, but it's not. Just because you put a mask on, does that make you a different person? Nope. Nope. It's on the inside of what counts. So, they begin to deal with these issues, and really, what I don't want to discredit is that these feelings are fake. I don't want to say, like, okay, this person who's experiencing gender dysphoria, that's a fake feeling, that's not a real feeling, or that's probably a genuine feeling, okay? But what I'd really like to get down to is like, what's really going on here? Like, what's the real problem? And generally, the people never actually make it down to that level, because our culture is like, oh, you just need to be trans. That's what it is. So just go be trans. And they're like, okay, and then off they go. Rather than, is it self-acceptance issues, self-esteem issues, self-confidence issues? Are you having some sort of issue of feeling accepted by your peers? Because I'll be honest, like the LGBTQ community in our culture has now become a protected community. Like if you're being bullied, all you have to say is like, I'm LGBTQ. No more bullying, otherwise you're going to jail. Like, I mean, that's kind of where it's at now. And so it's become trendy to do things like that, rather than genuinely getting help for the insecurities that you're facing. So hear me when I say that. If you're struggling with any of these things, okay, find someone who can genuinely help you walk through these things. Because if they're going to champion you into this process, they're going to champion you into a process that will literally cut your lifespan in half. Statistically, it does every time. So just bear that in mind. So now let me conclude it this way. All right, so we got really confusing about some stuff. Let's talk about it this way. It's based upon the gender that you were assigned, either masculine, feminine, male, female, man, woman, however you want to call that, at birth by God. Let's go with something else that was assigned to us at birth. Ethnicity by God. Your parents gave you your name. Okay, so ethnicity is assigned to you at birth by God. It was God who determined what race you would be. I hate that word. I hate it so much. I hate the idea of racism. It's not a biblical Christian concept. Because we believe that there's how many races? Because God made one man, one woman, and from them everyone else came. One race. It's called humanity. That's it. That's it. Okay, now we're actually into ethnicity. Because if you go to Revelation 7:9, it says, a person, a representative from every nation, tongue, and tribe, and language will be before the throne of the God, worshiping him. So God actually likes diversity. God likes the ethnicities. Okay, so the idea of racism and certain races being elevated or superior to other races is not a Christian concept. It's actually a evolutionary, secular concept. It's saying that certain races are higher evolved than other races. That's actually where that comes from. It's an anti-Christian concept. So as Christians, we're not into that. We actually celebrate ethnicity, because here's the thing. You could have been born anywhere, on any continent, to any ethnicity, to any people. Instead, God chose that you would be born to your parents in a certain location, in a certain culture, as a certain ethnicity. That was all assigned to you. And you could just like fight it, right? You can be like, I don't want to be one of those or anything. You can fight that. Or you can just embrace it. And actually, that's actually what our culture is all about. Like, if you come in and be like, hey, I'm this ethnicity, and I'm just going to be happy that God gave me this ethnicity because he assigned it my ethnicity, and because I'm this color or that color or anything like that, we are told like, yeah, celebrate your ethnicity, what God assigned you with. Now, why don't we do that with gender? Why don't we do that with gender? Simple, because we want to rebel, because we're broken. We're broken individuals. Unlike Adam and Eve, who were made whole in the garden, we're broken. And what we're doing is we're trying to find something that completes us. Maybe it's gender issues, maybe it's identity issues, maybe it's you're totally fine being heterosexual, but then you're going to look for some other person to complete you. I see that all the time. Some girl always has to have a boyfriend. Why? Is she not good enough without one? These are the questions you guys run into. So really, what I really want you guys to think about is, okay, what did God give me as a sacred, perfect gift? He made me specifically me, a man. And I can fight that. I can push back against that all I want. Or the other option is I can enjoy and cherish the good gift that God has given me. And I can lean into the gender that God has given me. And I can celebrate it and worship him because of what he has given me. And the same thing, if you do that as well, then as a society, as a race, one singular race, humanity, we actually grow together.